Do they make babies?
They don't make babies. They're more like friends. But like if you meet an alien, how would you communicate?
You communicate by Hello and welcome to the Metacast podcast, episode 7 to the power of 2 or 49. And that's going to be a dorky, nerdy episode where we being me, Ilya Bezilov, your host, and my co-host, what's your name?
Hello, Arnab here. You found a way to plug it in finally.
I'm like, I forgot to introduce ourselves. So I'm circling back. There is no way to re-record, right? So we are just doing it raw. Anyway, so today's topics are nothing to do with our business. We are going to conclude 2023 with talking about our most favorite books and podcasts, and also a little bit about our favorite products of the year. Yeah, we just wanted to make it light for ourselves, but also kind of it's interesting to just draw a line and look back, at your Goodreads reading challenge and all this stuff and see what's been really exciting in the year. Because when I was looking back at what books have been really good this year, I'm like, oh wow, these books, I even forgot I read them. So it was really nice to kind of reflect back.
Right. And this episode is coming out on January 3rd, right?
I think so.
Okay, so Happy New Year!
Yay! And Merry Christmas if you celebrate.
Yeah, all right. Hope everybody had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. We also took a little bit of break, or actually, as we record, we're going to take a little bit of break, but as you're listening, we took a little bit of break already and we're back.
Yeah, back to the future. So we are recording this on December 18th for the record. So we are about to take on our breaks. So you are going to that piece of land that used to be floating in the middle of nowhere until it collided into Eurasia.
Yeah, millions of years ago, yes.
Tens of millions of years ago, yeah.
No, more than that. Probably. We're showing our ignorance in geology now, but probably hundreds of millions at least, yeah.
Dude, I only learned about this last week when I was looking at the child book about dinosaurs that showed Pangaea, and then as part of that thing it showed that India used to be attached to, I think, Antarctica or Australia. Yeah, and then it kind of, for a while, Pangaea was drifting apart and India was drifting on its own in the middle of nowhere together with Madagascar until it finally collided into Eurasia, and I think you said high Himalayan mountains were formed at that time.
Because of that, yeah. And that's why they're still growing. And we were also saying the same kind of thing in BC and Alberta. This area used to be in the middle of equatorial, warm, shallow ocean kind of thing. And lots of life, the Cambrian explosion of life was a big part of that. And now you can see those fossils on top of the mountains in Banff. It's amazing, yeah. That's what I was telling you. You should go sometime. Kids would love it.
That's very cool. All right, so let's get started. Arnab, let's start with our top 3 books for the year. What was your number 3?
Number 3, Ministry of the Future. I think we've talked about it a little bit in one of the earlier episodes, but it's especially the climate right now. Climate as in the social climate around climate worsening and all that. So this book is amazing that it's kind of like a snippet into our world 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the future. And it's fiction, but at the beginning of every chapter, it's like a page and a half of what's happening right now. And why does the author think that what he's kind of describing in that chapter is going to happen based on the current data and everything that we have. So it's a pretty awesome book.
Cool. Yeah, and you can go back and listen to a few of our episodes where you talked about it. I kind of find it hard to pick up my number 3 because I cheated on this part of the agenda a little bit, because I actually grouped my favorites into 3 topics. And there are multiple books in each of those topics. First one, I started with the meta point, because I used to read 50 books a year. And then I would just gobble down those books. I don't know if there was a good reason for this, but we'll also get to that a bit later too, when we talk about Duolingo. This year, I think I only read about 20 books or so, but I was much more discreet in my consumption. I only read the books that I really wanted to read, and I actually abandoned the books that I didn't feel like continuing. So everything that I read this year, I really enjoyed. because I didn't finish books for the sake of finishing. So I would say number 3, I'll start with fiction, because fiction is kind of hard to categorize. So this year I finished the Three-Body Problem trilogy. I read the Three-Body Problem a few years ago, but then I read the second and the third books this year.
What is it? Death's End and...
Death's End is number 3, and Dark Forest is number 2. Yeah. So the reason why I really like those books, and I don't want to give any spoilers, is just how mind-bending they are. Did you really think we are alone in the universe? The author is very convincing. I think I even had a bit of nightmares after the last one.
Yeah, the last one is... Well, the name is giving it a bit away, Death's End, but...
Yeah, like seeing things that you love destroyed and all that. I'm giving a bit of spoilers here now.
But not destroyed like in a Hollywood way, not like your bridges and highways falling apart. It's in a completely different way, yeah.
Yes, destroyed in a scientifically mind-bending way. I also hooked my son on the Three-Body trilogy. He read it in probably 2 weeks, the whole series, and he loved it. He actually even requested the 4th one from the library. I know you read it, you said it was fan fiction, it's not as good. I don't have an intention to read it, but he's like, yeah, I just want to check it out. So yeah, we'll see.
That's one of the books I didn't finish. But yeah, Three-Body is like exceptional. I think I read it a couple of years back, maybe the first time, then I reread it once, and this year I went through it again. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So what's your number 2?
Number 2 would be, going with the science fiction theme, Project Hail Mary. This is from Andy Weir from The Martian. He had a couple more books after that, right? So The Martian, and then there was like a Artemis. Artemis I didn't enjoy it quite as much, but oh my god, Project Hail Mary is amazing. And this is exactly the kind of science fiction that I love.
What's the TLDR? What is it about?
There's a group of people who have to go out on a mission. I'll try not to give you spoilers about why they have to go and all, but they go, and then he finds out that he's kind of alone at some point. The other 2 people have passed away for whatever reason. And then he meets an alien and they kind of solve a problem together. It's amazing. Like,
do they make babies?
they don't make babies. They're more like friends. But just the way, like if you meet an alien, how would you communicate? It starts from that level. But this guy, the person who is the main character in there, at least from the human side, if you think about the character, it's kind of like the Martian character, where he's like very heavy into basic science. He's actually a science teacher in elementary school. It's amazing how the whole development of like, how am I going to communicate with this thing? What is their world like and all that? It really cool book.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something that I might actually pick up, because I really enjoyed that part of the Three-Body trilogy where they were communicating with other civilizations and how the other civilizations figured out how to translate our stuff.
Right. And some of the things, like just the way he does in Martian, it's the basics, right? Like there's hydrogen, helium. That's true everywhere in the universe. So that's the language that you want to like, okay, this is invariant in our world and it's invariant in your world, but you have a different way of talking about it. But let's try to communicate about this, which will establish our numbering system and alphabet and all that. So it's pretty cool, yeah.
It's kind of interesting that those books or those movies always assume that there is like a numbering system. There is a language. What if those concepts don't even apply?
So this is like that. There is a twist like that. I won't tell you more. I think I've given enough. You will enjoy it. Yeah, read it. There was also a movie a few years back. I'm forgetting. But the aliens, they come to Earth and they don't have a language in the way we think about a language. They kind of communicate in signs that they draw all the time. They're more like time. It's more like they're communicating time rather than they're communicating an expression. It's a very cool movie. I'll try to find the name and we'll add it to the show notes.
When you said the word communicate, I had this song playing in my head. Will you communicate by You remember
I don't
that?
know that song, no.
So what does the fox say?
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm clearly not singing it well. My number 2 is actually a few books. I just want to group them together because in the beginning of the year, I had a bit of an obsession. I wanted to better understand how Apple builds products. I built the creative selection by Ken Kashianda a long time ago, many years ago. I really enjoyed it. And I just accidentally picked up a biography of Johnny Ive, who used to be the designer. I think the book is called Johnny Ive. Then after that, I read Build by Tony Fadell, and then Insanely Simple by, I think, Ken Segal. So the 3 books about Apple, just absolutely fascinating to take a look at Apple from different perspectives, because Fadell is more engineering and business. Insanely Simple is more about marketing and positioning, product development in some way. Johnny Ive is more around just perfection of the physical form and software, and just how you build the impossible. Yeah, I just love these kind of stories. Those books really made me appreciate the simplicity and how hard it is to achieve something that's simple, because simplicity usually requires solving that last percentile problem that is exponentially more effort to solve. Like, making the case of the notebook slimmer, right? Or making it in 1 piece as opposed to like 5 pieces. And just that drive to make things really, really high quality and perfect. I'm like, wow, this is why Apple's products are so great. Anyway, I don't know if there are any specific things from those books that you can say like, oh, I take these lessons and I apply them. No, it's more around like the mindset.
At least the Insanely Simple book, I think there's a lot of things that are probably common sense, but once you read it, it will probably sink in more. For example, like how complexity usually takes over in an organization. Ken Segal, the author, they did a really good job describing how Apple tries to prevent complexity at like every single level and why it's so hard.
And I wonder how much of the role of the complexity killer plays the single person. I mean, Apple still continues to do great products, but maybe it's part of that is inertia too. Because now Jobs has gone, Johnny Ive has left. I don't know how much longer they will be able to sustain that pace, right?
And also one of the core things they were talking about, right? Like iPhone, it's just an iPhone. It's not like a Samsung Galaxy S54 or like you have 20,000 choices. But now, 10 years, 15 years later, we do have a iPhone Pro Max and iPhone Pro and iPhone Mini. There's like an S line.
Pro Max Plus S.
Yeah, so you do see some of that, I think, starting to come back. But this continuity stuff, you and I both love it. The ability for us to just use our iPhone as the camera. It just works seamlessly, hand off. Like when you just copying something on your computer and pasting it on your this thing. Like these things have existed in outside of Apple ecosystem before, but they have always been glitchy. Sometimes it won't work, and there's probably a technical reason why it didn't work, but it's hard for the user to know when things don't work. This stuff with Apple, it just works, always works.
Yes. Yeah, think about early Bluetooth. Occasionally it just would stop working. Whatever you do, it just doesn't work, and that was infuriating. Apple really solved the wireless problem in many ways. Yeah. So I'll have to add a plug here because it's in the same vein. Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson. That specific part where they talk about just the role Musk plays as the killer of complexity and driving force for simplification, for like making things simpler. It's kind of interesting because it's like Steve Jobs, but with a lot more in-depth look into how he does it. I mean, all the brutality and stuff aside, you can't argue with just how effective he was, and he has been in his companies. Yeah. So what's your number 1?
So wait, before we go away, I didn't read the Johnny Ive book. Do you recommend it? I mean, it's one of your favorites at the end of the year, so yeah, I guess.
I would say no. It's a good book, but only if you really like design, because they go a lot into the industrial design, how they make things, how they manufacture things. At some points, I was like, nah, it got a little bit too deep even for me in terms of the story. And also, I wouldn't say it's written as well as Walter Isaacson books. So I would give it a solid 4-star, just overall. But it's not the book that I would say, like, everybody should read this. If you like design, go listen to it. Don't even spend time reading.
Right. Talking about design, honorable mention for me this year. I know you read this book many times before, but when we started working on Metacast, I picked up the Mom Test. And I love that book. I have it right here anyway. On the topic of like design, user research and all that, I'll give it an honorable mention because I can't say it's like my top book of the year, but it was really helpful.
It is a great book, yeah. And number one goes to...
Number one, okay, so I started playing tennis a lot this year, or last year, for the listeners who are listening in the future in 2024. One of the books I picked up was Open by Andre Agassi. It is a autobiography, actually, but it's not really about tennis, although, of course, it is about tennis because it's about his life, but it's such a honest, open book about why he hates tennis, and he starts off by saying, I hate tennis. And it's a lifelong journey about why he hates tennis. It was amazing. I absolutely loved that book. And you can literally like feel him speaking to you when you read that book, yeah.
Cool. I'm meant to read it too. When I was I think in 7th grade or 8th grade, I had a writing notepads for school, and it had Andre Agassi on the cover. So it was like mid-90s. He was very big back then.
Yeah, with the long hair, maybe colorful clothes and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, he was probably like in his mid-20s, pretty young. Yeah. So my number one, I'm kind of torn because I feel like I also need to do like a bonus mention. Maybe we can do a bonus mention after this.
Yeah, I have some bonuses, yeah.
Yeah, but my number one, this year has been a big year for me spiritually. And, we talked about that here and there, and I also mentioned it later in the podcast as well. But one book that I picked up and read was Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. And, some people say Dispenza is a kind of snake oil salesman, and there are millions of people who admire his work and get benefits from his work. It's a book about meditation. It's a book about meditation, about altered states of consciousness. Kind of my main takeaway from it, once I read the book, I bought the meditations, which you have to buy separately as well, and I practiced some of those on a continuous basis. I had no idea you could reach altered states of consciousness just by meditation alone. He uses some sound frequencies and like you lie down, you relax. I had so many experiences. I would be like gobbled up by a pink Tyrannosaurus Rex and then washed away into some kind of like a roller coaster water slide. I see this as almost like movies in front of my eyes. I only experienced this previously, under influence of substances, right? So this is really interesting. And then you go in there, you can have some insights, your body can shake or stuff like that to kind of release the tension. And I was like, wow, you can achieve this with meditation without having to go like to the other part of the world for a retreat or something. So yeah, actually, I do want to do one of his retreats at some point too. They're just a bit pricey because, they cost okay, like $2,500 I think, but you have to pay for your own hotel. It goes like easily to like $5,000. I will do it at some point. But yeah, Dispenza is really great. I've also quickly listened to two of his other books, You're the Placebo and Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which are his earlier books. I would say they are also pretty good, but not as good as the last one. And if you were to just pick up one book, Becoming Supernatural is the book to pick up.
I am nowhere close to this, right? As you know, but I have started doing some sleep time meditation recently. And I really enjoyed it so far. Like the basics in the beginning, I was just doing like, how like feel different parts of your body going to relax mode and all that. That was great. But one I did recently, you're like inside a glowing dome in a very open space. And that space can be wherever, right? It was like a 20-minute meditation and I loved it. And then I started doing more and more of it.
Nice. So you're doing guided meditations?
Yeah.
What's the source? Where do you get them from?
Apple Fitness Plus, I think. Yeah. Like we bought something, we got Fitness Plus, and I was like, okay, let's check it out. And then I started it. Yeah. Before that, we were doing that. What's the app? I really like that app too for like sleep meditation.
Calm or Headspace?
Headspace, yes. Really like that guy's voice. I mean, everybody does who uses that.
Oh, it's interesting. Like I remember I tried Headspace, but I tried it after Calm. And on Calm, there's this person, Tamara Levitt. I just loved her voice. And then basically after her, like whoever was the voice I would hear, I'm like, not the same. I think voice plays a major role in that, yeah. So what is your bonus mention?
Bonus mentions, I'll just do quickly. 3 body problems we already did. The other thing is a series called Bobbyverse. If you like fun science fiction, this is more in the realm of like fun than science, unlike the 3 body problem. but it's a massive epic saga of like world domineering and all that by a set of robots who take on human consciousness.
I mean, style-wise, it's close to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because it has so much absurdity in there.
Yeah. And have you read these books?
I have, yes, on your recommendation back like 5 years ago. I even wrote to Dennis Taylor, to the author, on Twitter because I was curious because of this whole multiverse thing. It is very similar conceptually, probably inspired by as well Robert Heinlein's By His Bootstraps short story, where the main character was Bob, and Bob was multiplying. So I'm giving a bit of spoiler here. So Bob was multiplying. I just wrote to him. I'm like, hey, like I really enjoyed your books, and I'm just curious: is the name Bob a homage to Heinlein? Because Heinlein wrote it in the 40s, I think. It's a very old story. And he's like, no, it's just like the most common name of an American you can think of. I'm like, oh, damn it. But I was really excited that he actually responded to me. It was really cool.
So there were 3 books so far. The 4th book, Heaven River, came out in 2023 or maybe late 2022. That's when I read the first 3 books again before I read this one. And the 4th one was really cool. So if you haven't, go pick that up. Yeah.
I think I only read the first 3. By the time I finished with Bobbyverse, I think the 4th haven't come out yet. So yeah, I'll check it out. My bonus mentions. I know not everybody will enjoy these books, but I just couldn't leave those out. So there are 3 books. So first, It's So Easy and Other Illusions by Duff McKagan. Oh, sorry, It's So Easy and Other Lies, I think it's called. And then another one, it's How to Be a Man and Other Illusions by Duff McKagan again. And then Slash by Slash. So these are the 3 books about basically the story of Guns N' Roses, and also the preceding years of how Duff McKagan, who was a bass player, and Slash, who was a lead guitar player, kind of grew up, the whole kind of drug addiction story, alcohol addiction, getting sober, losing people along the way, their friends dying and all that. You don't learn anything from those. But those stories, for some reason, even though I never suffered from addiction, they would sometimes just like crack me open and I would just start crying reading those. I don't know why, but for me, reading those books was very cathartic for some reason. So yeah, like I wouldn't recommend reading those, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, if you feel like stories about addiction and conquering addiction is something that you feel an urge to read about, those books are really interesting.
Cool. I have one last mention before we go to podcasts. That would be Neil Stephenson, one of my favorite science fiction authors, Cryptonomicon, Snow Crash. He's probably got like 15 more big hits like that. But he had a book called Seven Eves come out, I think at the end of last year or sometime this year. I really enjoyed that book. This one is more like hard science, actual practical kind of science rooted in deep factual stuff, rather than like more fun, comic-y kind of stuff that I tend to enjoy usually. But this was a great read. I think there's a movie coming out about it too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's also a movie coming up about Three-Body Problem, which I'm looking forward to.
Yes, I'm excited. So I saw there is a Three-Body Problem TV series already, but I think it's like Chinese or Korean or something.
I think it's Chinese.
Yeah, and I tried watching it. I couldn't really get into it. Maybe the Hollywood movie might be more suited to our tastes.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm really curious how they will visualize the 4-dimensional space.
Oh, yeah. 11-dimensional space.
I think 11-dimensional, they never really visualized there. But 4-dimensional, you could imagine what he was describing. But I think going beyond 4 dimensions is just a theoretical exercise.
But at the whole end of it, without giving too many spoilers, what he describes, that is many dimensions, but also you could totally figure out what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Let's do are we doing podcast or episodes or either one? I guess it could be anything.
I'm doing episodes and a podcast. So I'll start with number 3, which is a bit meta, but it's Metacast, our podcast.
Wait, it's not your favorite podcast?
I have to be honest, right? Well, it's definitely my favorite podcast to record because it's the only podcast I record. What I really liked about past year of us doing the podcast and meeting interesting people, which we wouldn't have otherwise met without the podcast, is also researching them. By researching those people, I got exposed to so many different podcasts that they had previously been on. So basically, my consumption, if I guess I look at my history, there isn't really much of a pattern there because I've just been doing so much research. Like Jason Fried, I would listen to his free interviews, or other people would listen to one or two of their interviews. But I just got so much exposure and appreciation for all of the different podcasts and styles that people have. So yeah, I just want to thank Metacast for giving me the opportunity to go broad into various topics.
We should talk about this, I think. Well, the next episode we'll do is kind of like a reflection and looking forward to 2024, right? So we'll talk a little bit more, but I feel like I have changed so much as a person because of the Metacast podcast. The ability to research somebody's life, come up with like great things to talk about, and also like actually carry the conversation when it's happening.
Yeah, I think both of us have gotten just so much more comfortable with this, and I'm pretty sure it made us better small talkers as well. It's hard to measure.
Well, I think maybe that part of my personality is also changing, but I am not usually the person who would go out and talk to strangers at parties, right? I'm not an introvert, but it's not me who would go and talk to them. But I feel like that's changing quite a lot too, because I find it much more easy to go out and talk to people about their lives and all that, and like just plug into the conversation very quickly now.
That's true, yeah. And actually also running a podcast, you just learn how open people are about stuff. So yeah, if these people are so open, a person at a party could very well be as well. So yeah, it's actually a very good point. So what's your number 3?
It's hard to do numbers for these.
Choose a fork.
Yeah, let's do Hard Fork, yeah. Hard Fork is a podcast I love. You know that already. You don't like it much, which is fine.
I do. It's just not something that I'm like looking forward to every single episode to come out.
No, I like the way they talk, the chemistry, the banter, everything about that show, right? But the specific episode I'm going to talk about is the Bing Who Loved Me, back from like sometime in the summer. That was an insane episode where people were starting to go crazy with ChatGPT, right? And they are like journalists, these both of them. This is when Microsoft had just announced the partnership with OpenAI, and they had incorporated ChatGPT inside Bing.
It came out in March 2023. I was staying with you for our offsite or whatever we called it when it came out, and I was driving to Seattle and I was listening to that. Yes.
Right. I remember I told you like you have to listen to this episode like right now. Yeah. It's almost like how crazy language models can get and how they seem to have a sort of personality, and there's like all these personality quirks. Like, I'm actually not ChatGPT. I'm Sydney, and I hate Microsoft and all that. It was crazy, yeah.
Yeah, man, you should just call it creepy because that's what it is.
Yeah. I would say that was one of the highlights of the year in terms of podcast episodes. Okay, let's go with your...
So my second best is I discovered this podcast called The Really Good Podcast by Bobby Althoff. I don't listen to it anymore. I just don't find it as appealing anymore. But I discovered her on TikTok. She was like a young mom kind of TikToker personality with millions of followers, kind of emotionless. That was kind of her shtick, so to speak. And then she started a podcast where she would be, I mean, she still is, I think, in her current episodes. She plays a role of being this unemotional, like bitch, you could say, right? Who asks very direct questions. And the episode that really caught my attention was she was with Mark Cuban, recording an episode in a parking lot, sitting in like greasy, oily parking lot floor in like white socks. Just like the setting was so bizarre.
And Mark Cuban being the like billionaire investor and entrepreneur. And
Exactly. It just didn't reconcile. So I had to watch it, or maybe I listened to it. Like her podcast persona is that she's so unemotional, it's like downright rude. She would be like, can you give me some money? Why not? And the way people react to that, the way the conversation is handled is just so interesting. I'm just like, wow, is that what Gen Z are like now? or what is this? So I remember I binged on her whole podcast, which at the time was maybe 6 or 7 episodes in like a couple of evenings while doing some stuff in the house. You don't learn much from it, but it's very interesting entertainment. And also, it's very different. It's just like, it's mind-bending a little bit. And you also see how people answer to those difficult questions, how they work around those issues. Actually, I think the way she started, she had somehow met Drake. I don't listen to him, but I know the name, right? So that's just a testament of how famous he is. And they recorded an episode lying in bed. Like both of them are lying in bed. It's very bizarre, yeah. It's actually no longer on her podcast even, but you can find it like a bootleg copy on YouTube. And I think he started introducing her to other people, and that's how she got started. And now she's doing like her own comedy shows with people that were on her podcast. Yeah, it's interesting because like those shows, they go from adversarial to awkward to like funny. It's just something that I thought I would call out. So, what's yours?
My second one, number 2, I'd say is the Duolingo Spanish podcast, right? So I started learning Spanish in 2022, end of 2022. So it's been a year.
¿Hablas español muy grande?
Sí, sí. Muy grande, sure, yeah. Muy bien, yeah. But you're learning too, so yeah, that's good. But anyway, yeah, so I've been learning it. So Duolingo has these series of podcasts like Duolingo Spanish, Duolingo French, there's probably others. If you're learning a language, these are almost intermediate level kind of podcasts, but they don't translate directly. So it is pretty much in Spanish, but they would have some commentary in English in between, explaining the context and things like that. And then they will go into a conversation with like a native Spanish speaker or something like that, right?
So the person who is doing the podcast, is she a native speaker?
Yeah, she's from Argentina, I think. Somewhere South America, Latin America, yeah. I want to have her on our show at some point, but I think we both want to be really good conversational Spanish speakers by that time. That would be awesome. Having a Duolingo Spanish style podcast on Metacast, that would be killer, yeah. Martina Castro, I think. I just remembered her name.
Muy bien.
Muy bien. The specific episode I want to call out, if you have not heard it, just go listen to it, is called Las Cartas de Papa. It means the letters from dad. And it's about a person, it's a girl. She comes to the US and I'm forgetting exactly what the context was, but her dad says like, hey, go to this family, right? And go meet them. And they're from Argentina. They have always been in there. But her dad came to the US and lived with like a family as a house guest for like a few years. And then went back to Argentina.
When he was young or as an adult?
When he was young, like after university, he stayed there for a few years while he was working. Like a rent kind of thing, but a very personal, close relationship. And she never knew about the details. Like she knew that, okay, he lived there and all that, but he didn't know how attached he was to this family. Because when she went to their house, they showed like an entire room that was like, this was his room and these are all his stuff and letters and all that. And she started reading the letters and it's like an entire different side of her dad opened up to her. It's an amazing episode, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I think I'll probably do a couple more sections in Duolingo before I am able to actually comprehend this, but I'll start with that. Cool. Number one. Yeah, so my podcast listening is generally confined to sort of businessy podcasts. I think that's what I find most valuable in podcasts, like listening to people who are practitioners of stuff. So there is this whole podcast called Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. I haven't listened actually much to it, maybe like 5 or 6 episodes, but he's really good at asking questions. He has some really famous people on it. The one particular episode that I really enjoyed was one with Alex Hormozy. So Alex Hormozy is an entrepreneur who made his wealth mostly by it's like a package, right? Somebody opens a gym and then he has all the playbooks and all of the marketing and basically all the lead generation, all of the tools to drive traffic to the gym, right? He has all the scripts for the personnel there. So it's basically almost like a franchise thing. Then I think he was making his money on commissions from the leads that he was sending. I think he called it like a gym turnaround business, where business would either start or like gym was like almost failing, and then he would like bootstrap all of that flow of traffic there. I mean, it's an amazing thing. So he's a marketer. And then later he switched to other things. I think acquisition.com is his main thing right now. I don't even know what they do. I think they acquire companies and turn them around or something, or help them grow. So yeah, that episode was really interesting because he talked about how he quit the job that he hated. I think he also was talking about entrepreneurship there and how he was really afraid of his father and what would people think. But he also couldn't just stay one more day in I think he worked for the government or something. And then he quit And then he was like sleeping on the floor in his gyms and all that. I'm subscribed to him on LinkedIn. I read everything he posts.
He's very popular on LinkedIn, yeah.
He's very popular on LinkedIn, yeah. But he's really good. He actually mentioned Naval Ravikant a couple of times. So he is kind of similar to Naval, but much more emotional. His stuff really resonates with me. So yeah, that episode, I think I listened to it twice. Just his story and how he thinks about stuff and how he thinks about leverage and what to focus on, how to prioritize things. It's an amazing episode for anybody doing actually any kind of endeavor, because in any kind of endeavor you need to pick what to work on, how to prioritize, how to make it successful. But he is also an obsessive kind of personality. He works all the time. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt.
I have listened to a few of the CEO, Diary of a CEO episodes, but not this one. I'll add this and download it for my flight, because now we can in our app.
Yes, now we have this feature in the Metacast app. Yeah. I wish you guys had built it a week sooner so I could download my episode for my flight.
How this whole thing came about was I and Jenny were talking, and you and I were talking right before that, and you said, hey, can we somehow add like downloads in the next 2 days before your flight to Peru, right? And I was like, no, that's not going to happen.
No, you're mispresenting the stuff. It was 2 weeks in advance, not 2 days.
Okay, 2 weeks, but I was like, okay, it's not going to happen. There's a lot of work. Then I started talking to Jenny, like, hey, Jenny, I'm flying to India end of December. Let's work on this together and let's make this. And we did. There's still a few things missing, but the download feature is like I can download long episodes and take it with me on the flight. Yay!
There's clearly some politics and favorites in our little company now.
But the thing is, like, you opened this thing that, oh, I am flying too, and we need to have this feature. And when I told Jenny, she was like, do you all really only think about these problems when it happens to you? Because she's in Costa Rica, right? She doesn't have a good mobile network or some complication like that. We won't go into the details, but she basically cannot listen to podcasts while outside of Wi-Fi.
She can stream on cell, yeah.
Right. And like most people, that's pretty much the only time when you listen to podcasts is when you're outside, maybe on a walk or something. I do at least. So for her, the download feature has been like the biggest gap in our app for a while. So yeah. Anyway, coming back to downloads and podcasts, this gets right into the thing because Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. So I have been a favorite of his history podcast for a long time now.
But you'll be the favorite of his podcast?
That podcast has been one of my favorites for a while now. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say I have been a... No.
Yes, that's what I said.
I wish. But anyway, so he does 5-6 hour long episodes, and these are like very detailed looks. So the type of history that he does is not a fact-oriented one. It's more like a storytelling, narrative kind of thing. So he would pick up people's from the past and like go into their character and the arc of their life and things like that. Because they're like 5-6 hour long, very heavy in research and production quality, he releases maybe one a year or 2 a year max. So the latest from this year, it actually dropped like a month back. I finished it already. It's Twilight of the Aesir Part 2. What he tends to do is like 4 or 5 episodes focused on like one topic. If you want to get into like First World War, like the trench warfare and strategies and who lost why, where did it turn and all that, excellent series of like 5 episodes he has. And similar for like from the Japanese perspective for the Second World War. There's a lot of like really good ones. Now this one, Twilight of the Aesir, is about... In our popular culture today, in Hollywood, there's a lot of like Thor and Ragnarok and Odin and all that, right? The Viking gods and their culture and all that.
Norse mythology,
yeah. In fact, we do read a lot of it too. Like our kids, at least in North America, it's very popular to know Norse mythology. He gets into like the high days of the Viking era, and they were pagans, right? Like pagan people. And how Christianity overcame that period, how it influenced it, and eventually like how we completely forgot that whole culture. And what we see today is probably nothing like what was practiced at that time. And he goes really deep into this. So basically, Twilight is as in that period where Christianity is starting to take over all of Europe. And the Vikings, like, I don't know if you know, but pretty much all over on the western side, like England, Iceland, all these, Greenland, even some parts of North America too, right? They kind of came over here. On the other side, I didn't know they had so much influence in Russia and the original like Slavic steppe populations and all that. Yeah, it was mind-opening. But the Twilight is basically like how Christianity slowly put a sunset on the original Norse culture and how things changed around 1,000 years ago. So amazing episodes.
Actually, it's interesting. I had a conversation about paganism and Christianity displacing it with one of the facilitators of the retreat in Peru that I just came back from. Because he was talking about herbalism and using plant medicines to cure. And we're not talking about psychedelics at this point. It's just like for curing, right? In Peru, in the Amazon basin, they have things for everything. He's like, oh, if you have diarrhea, take 3 drops of the dragon's blood, sangre de grado, and like the diarrhea just stops. I mean, this kind of stuff, it has nothing to do with like altered state of consciousness. It's just like this is how these people have been curing themselves for thousands of years. And that also was present in modern day Europe, basically pretty much in all cultures, right? And then Christianity came, Inquisition came and just wiped all of that out. And now we just have the remnants of some of those cultures a little bit here and there. So he actually really piqued my interest in this topic. So I might listen to this podcast because I'm like, what could have been if we didn't standardize on the same religion, for that part of the world? Generally, we standardize on just a handful of religions, but I think all of them despise paganism and all that.
Yeah, cool. Let's get into the last part of today's episode. So best products. Let's start with yours. Number 3.
My product, Metacast.
Yes.
We've been working on the app for a big part of this year. It's a podcast app that is so good, it's irresistible.
Yeah.
We are about to ship it. It's just like weeks before we ship it, I think. And it's such an interesting process to actually be able to build an app that solves the problems that, I personally thought was like, why doesn't everybody do this already? And then nobody had been doing this, so we just built our own app. I feel like it's changing how I'm listening to podcasts. It's changing the value I'm getting out of podcasts. And yeah, I can't wait to share it with people.
Yeah, me too. I think one of the reasons my audiobook listening went down quite a lot this year is because I have been listening to a lot more podcasts this year. And obviously we are biased, but I like it so far, the ability to do that. Also, in terms of the process of building it, maybe we will go into it more next week for the episode, or the week after that, I think, because we'll have a guest for one of the upcoming episodes. But it's interesting how in the beginning part, pre-summer-ish, I think that was the beginning part of when we started working on this, it was more about building the things that doesn't exist in any other podcast app. Then there was a period of like, okay, we have built that. Now let's also build all these other things that you absolutely need in a podcast app, table stakes. And somewhere around there, we're kind of like towards the end of that phase right now. But we're starting to see how simplicity goes away. And we're having conversations about this like daily. We want to add this, that, but it does complicate. You can use the app in so many different ways. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We should talk about it more next week when we talk about like reflections and plans for 2024. But I found it personally very interesting to see those different phases of developing the product so far.
Yeah, what I'm really excited about is how we are unencumbered by bureaucracy and all that. We just look at some of those decisions and we're like, yeah, let's do it differently. Let's do it this way or that way. And we can just drop the project that we are working on or change it or do something else and like reprioritize things. Like in a big company, it would be like you have to convince 10 people to like turn the ship around. And we can just make those decisions with the snap of a finger. So I'm enjoying it.
And in that area, I think you and I, we have a long history in Amazon. You had in Google too. So there's a lot of positives, but there's a lot of baggage also in the way I think we were thinking about the product life cycle. We'll go about it into more details next week, but I am seeing a big change in how we think about releasing a product and is it okay to release it like this to all users? So let's see. Yeah, all of that.
Right. So what's your favorite product?
So I don't have too many. There's just really one, I would say it's Duolingo, which is in your list also, I see. But it's a hell of a, I was about to say addictive app, but that is negative. It's actually addictive, but in a positive way. It has made a significant difference in my ability to be comfortable with Spanish. Learning a different language is very hard. Especially, I think, once you're an adult and you have been used to one language for a while. I'm sure you're finding out slowly. But the way it introduces this and kind of the repetition without making it boring, you just become naturally fluent in it. I'm not fluent right now. I still have to think and then say. But I can pretty much express whatever I want, the simple basic daily things. For example, we have house cleaners who come in once in a while. They are like Spanish native speakers. And I talk to them like, okay, the dog is here right now, so you guys start downstairs and then I'll take him for a walk. When I come back, I'll come through the back door and then by the time you'll be up there, so it's all good. And they get all of that. It's amazing.
Yeah. I picked up Duolingo as well on my flight from Peru back to the US last Wednesday. Well, I mean, we're recording this on Monday, so it was like 5 days ago. And I did like 2,500 XPs in one day because I spent 3.5 hours on Duolingo learning Spanish. It was part coming from maybe a bit of frustration because the place where I was in Iquitos, people don't speak English. Even in our hotel, to ask them to book a taxi for me for next morning to go to the airport, I had to ask somebody else to ask them. Or I would have to use like Google Translate. I just had somebody nearby, so it was more convenient. And then I was like at the airport and I wanted to buy a bottle of water, non-carbonated. And it said Sin gas. And I don't know if sin is with or without. If you like shake the bottle, I see some bubbles. I don't know, right? So I had to ask, but I didn't know how to ask in Spanish. So, but luckily the person in duty free spoke in English. But then I was doing Duolingo at the airport all the time I had there. And then literally an hour later, I learned that sin means without. And I was like, how nice would it have been if I could just read this? So yeah, and I'm picking up language. I think my vocabulary is now 350 words. That's what Duolingo says. What I found about this app is just how addictive it is with all the leagues and experience points that sometimes I would do things at inappropriate times because I'm getting like the double XP stuff, or I would like do this repetitive thing like learn the vocabulary and like there is no single word I don't know. Like I don't struggle. It's more just like speed and pattern matching. Or like I'm doing something for speed and I don't even look at the sentence. I know that
what they mean, yeah.
No, I know the pattern. For example, if a sentence starts with a yo, which is I, and then the first verb ends with an o, it means that verb goes in there. And then the other verb goes into the second part of the sentence. You don't need to read it. You just pattern match the sentence structure, right? It's not really learning. It's just like gaming.
No, but that exactly is language learning. Language is pattern matching.
Actually, maybe you're right, yeah. But I found that part to be like, I need to limit my usage of Duolingo now. Obviously, it's not as bad as social media because at least you get some benefit from it. I mean, you get a lot of benefit from it. But yeah, I'm pretty committed now to learning Spanish. It goes pretty easily at this point. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. And once I learn Spanish, it also opens up an opportunity to learn other Latin languages like Italian and French. It's my app of the year for sure. I even bought a premium subscription.
The gamification of it, that's there in a lot of different places too. But the UX, the storytelling, the characters that they have, and you and I were talking about just the sounds, it's just perfect, fits into the whole package they have for the brand of Duolingo, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I love the sounds. Yeah, I even have my headphones, just hear the sounds because they're so nice. That ding, yeah.
Talking about learning Spanish, if you're serious and you want to fast track it, there is a great audiobook called Learning Spanish, I think the first steps. And there is a second Learning Spanish, the second steps by a person called Paul Noble. I think he's a professor of different languages in England. I might be a bit off here. What he does is he's not talking grammar and sentence structure and all that. His style is to learn a language, you need to start speaking it. What he does is, for the Spanish one, he has a Latin American Spanish speaker, male, and a Spain, like Catalonia kind of Spanish speaker, a female. So he says something and then they repeat it. It's amazing. At first, I didn't think that, okay, this will get me far, but let me try it anyway. Within an hour or two, I was like, wow, I'm having conversations actually. And then that on top of Duolingo is much deeper. I think it's a lot more words and vocabulary and all that. Between the two of them, I feel like very comfortable now.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, let's get to your products.
The things that we wanted to talk about is not just products, but also maybe like experiences we had this year. So for me, the most transformative thing that happened to me this year was actually going to the South America, to the Amazon, and doing ayahuasca. You know, at first when I heard about it, I'm like, yeah, it's a drug. That's how people refer to it. Maybe because it's on the list of prohibited substances in most of the Western countries. But what's interesting about it is that there they call it medicine. I think I only was able to fully comprehend that meaning in my first time there. Because the first time, it just overpowers you. It overwhelms you, all these visions and the insights you're having and all that, and also some darkness. Paul Rosalie on Lex Friedman podcast said that ayahuasca opens the heart of darkness, which is what happens for many people. But it's like Luke Skywalker going through the cave. You have to see the darkness to see the light, to come out of that. And that's what it helps you do. But it's very difficult to surrender to something that wrestles you to the ground and just like beats you, with a hammer on the head, so to speak, because that's how the first experience feels like. But then my second time there, actually, I found my way of working with her almost like as a tool.
When you say her, it's ayahuasca you're talking about.
Yeah, her, I mean like ayahuasca, yeah. Oh, you could call it it. Because actually, I'm not sure if it tells you anything that's not already in your mind. So first time you also get like, oh my God, all these spirits talking to me and all that. But then the second time when you actually are able to navigate the experience a lot better, then I don't think I've seen anything that's not part of me already. It just was very like multiple layers underneath the surface, right? Underneath conscious. And then you learn to work with that. You learn to use her as a dagger to extract all those. I don't want to go into the details. It's like too personal. But I think the first time I went there, it was in February. I think the main outcome was that it gave me clarity that the path I'm on professionally, working for Google, doing what I was doing, was not my path. I just had to get off that path. So when I got off that path, I left the job, we started doing Metacast, and I still felt a lot of panic attacks, and I was scared because like it's one thing to know that what you're doing is the wrong thing, but like how do you get the conviction that what you're doing is the right thing, right? And that's what the second time was really helpful with. I asked her about the purpose, and basically the response was that my purpose is to create no matter what. I just have to create. I'm the creator.
That's beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of obvious. Looking back in my life, I'm like, yes, that's when I felt the happiest and in the flow and all that. But just somehow it helped me solidify that feeling. And I'm like, yes, I'm on the right path. So, and now I'm just, full steam ahead. It's obviously much more deep than that, and there's a lot more going around. I don't want to give people the impression that you want to go and do it to solve your work problems or something. It's a holistic thing for the life. Work is just part of life.
And you may not end up solving your problems. You may end up creating more problems too. You don't know what's going to happen, yeah.
In the short term, yes. People end their relationships, they quit their jobs, they do all sorts of crazy stuff just because they get this clarity of all of the things that have been going wrong. But then, like finding the right things is something that takes more effort. But that's something that really transformed me, I think. And if people are interested to talk about that, actually, I'm always happy to have a chat. Especially after going there the second time, I think ayahuasca is misunderstood in our world. Well, I was also guilty of misunderstanding it before I was able to experience it like for 10 times.
Yeah. You had, I think, one more thing in there. And I feel like I had a few honorable mentions, but they're not even worth bringing up. I think this is going beautifully. So let's finish with what you were going to talk about next, yeah.
Yeah, and I know what you can follow up this with. One thing that I discovered, actually 2 things I discovered this year, also apart after doing ayahuasca, is running and singing as a way to move energy. If I feel like shit, just get out and run for 3 kilometers. And then inevitably I feel good. I ran this morning and I feel awesome, and I didn't feel as great before running. And also singing, or just music in general, but singing in particular for me, I mean, I've been doing music for over 20 years at this point, but it was always about how do I compose the most intricate thing and record it and all that.
The process of it was taking over.
the process of it, and also maybe the ego thing, like how can I compose, perfecting it, like creating something that's unique. Whereas it was also in Peru when I was there the first time in February. After the ceremony, they handed me the guitar and they said like, yeah, would you like to sing? And I'm like, sure. And it was cathartic. Just getting the guitar, playing chords and singing. I found that to be a way to just move energy around, to ground myself. I also realized that singing English songs or English language songs does not bring me the same feeling as singing some of the Russian songs because I don't connect with them as much. It's more of an intellectual connection, where in my own language it's more of an emotional connection. So yeah, I just started learning some songs, playing them on my acoustic guitar and playing them and singing, not even attempting to record anything. It feels so good. And I know you have a story like this as well. You began tennis.
I have enjoyed it quite a lot. I started at the end of 2022. I feel like you were saying about the process and getting it perfect and all. A lot of people find tennis very painful because it is a complicated sport. There's a lot of like technical parts to it that are complex to do well. And there's always somebody better than you. Even for the best in the world, like Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, there are two other guys who are on their day better than them. And I think a lot of people get into this competitive thing where I want to get to the next level, just like we do in our careers at work and all that, right? And there's always, I lose to that person all the time and all that. And I feel like there's always somebody who's going to be better at you. So there's no point in comparing yourself to them. Instead, just enjoy what you're doing. And if you're getting better over time, great. But even if you're not, if you're enjoying like the physical act of like going through this, spending that energy and releasing the hormones, I think that itself is like payoff enough. But yeah, I've enjoyed it quite a lot this year.
Yeah, you were saying how playing tennis really brings you clarity. It's like, when in doubt, go play tennis.
After playing tennis, especially if it's a long 2-3 hour session, you're dead tired, but your mind feels like it has opened up. And then on the way back home, I would usually take a detour, maybe drive around a little bit, because so many new thoughts come into me at that time. And then I would sometimes stop the car by the side of the road, write down some things because it's like, okay, this is important. Let me write this down as a quick one-line note.
Oh yeah, actually journaling is a very important tool that I've been kind of on and off, but I'm trying to keep it. Every time some thought comes up, I would just like write it down. And not thought as in like an idea for something, but it's more like I noticed something about my son, maybe like in how I feel toward him. And oh, this is interesting. Actually, it's something that needs more work. And I just like write it down, mark it with a star. And then next day I have like a whole system for like going back to this. Yeah.
I've just started writing a little bit, but I'll have to learn from you. Like, how do you use that in the future, going back to it and all that?
Yeah, more often than not, it's just the process of writing it down that does the work. Yeah. All right. So how can people find us?
So let's do this. If you have listened so far, send us an email and tell us about your favorite podcasts of the year, your favorite books, products, or experiences. Don't need to go deep if you don't want to. Just a one-liner like these were the top for me. That's enough.
And we will read those when we record the next time.
That would be awesome, yeah. Send it to hello@metacastpodcast.com.
Also sign up for our newsletter at metacastpodcast.com. Sign up for our app at metacast.app. Whenever it's released, you'll get an email. And we'll welcome you to be a user of our amazing podcast application.
And yeah, next week, I think we'll have a guest episode. We won't announce the name yet, but it's going to be one of my favorite apps from the last few years, creator of that. And then we're going to do an episode looking forward to 2024 and reflecting on the journey so far. So
yeah, and now we are off. I mean, you are off to that piece of land, that floating piece of land that created the Himalayas. And we might take a drive up to Charleston, South Carolina. And my wife is like, "Are you sure you want to go to South Carolina? Like, what are we going to do there?" And I'm like, we will never travel to South Carolina on purpose. Because like I didn't even know where it was until we moved to Florida. This is our opportunity to see the place where we wouldn't normally go. And actually I have a friend living there. So yeah, that's what I'm up to for this Christmas break.
And you folks like history, so I think Charleston would be an amazing place. I've never been there, but I've heard so many stories connected to or in Charleston that I think it would be an interesting place, yeah.
How interesting. I don't know any, so I'll have to dig something up. But what I learned is Savannah, which is a city in Georgia on the way to Charleston from us. That's where Forrest Gump was filmed. So now we'll have to watch Forrest Gump before going there, which I'm actually looking forward to because it's been probably 20 years since I watched it last time.
Right. We watched it with Pahi maybe a year back now. We all loved it, yeah.
I think it's the first time you said your daughter's name in the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's public information, I guess. So. Or even if it's not, it's for the exclusive ears of our listeners. So, yeah. All right.
Okay. All right. See you.
See you next year or this year, depending on who's listening or talking. So, yeah. Bye-bye.
Exactly. Bye.